Hi, I'm Lydia and I work in the communications team at the MS Trust. And today, via Zoom, because that's the sort of world we live in at the moment, I'm going to have a chat with podcaster, illustrator, and MS Trust supporter Jessie Ace. The MS Trust is really excited to have partnered with Jessie on her new Enabled Warrior Symptom Tracker book. And Jessie is so generously donating 50% of the profits from the book to the MS Trust. So today we're going to hear more about the inspiration behind the book and Jessie's journey with MS.
Yeah, my MS story is a little bit different to other people's because, most people, and I know this from podcasting and speaking to loads of people in the MS community, most people have like 10 years of diagnosis, 10 years of symptoms and things like that. My diagnosis actually happened in 3 days. It all kind of kicked off, if you like, on the last day of university. I was 22 years old and I'd woken up on that last day, typically the last day. I mean, come on, the last day of university, with a numb left side. Like my left side was not working whatsoever, and it was the weirdest thing I've ever experienced. I just felt so overwhelmingly exhausted, and I didn't really figure it out. I couldn't quite work out why that was. I thought it was just like, oh, I've been really stressed because of my uni course and degree and stuff. I did an art degree, so it was a very hands-on sort of degree. So to wake up and then have my left hand kind of not working very much was like, oh, okay, that's a little bit worrying. So yeah, but me being me, I was like, it's just a trapped nerve. I'm just tired. It'll be fine. It'll all be fine. So I waited a week to see if it would go away. Obviously it didn't, because what I now know was that it was a MS relapse. And so, yeah, my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, he dragged me to the doctors and he was like, look, this is not right. You need to go and see someone. It's like, fine, okay, whatever. Went to the doctors. She said it was a hemiplegic migraine. She was like, have you ever had a migraine before? I was like, I don't think so. No, what's that?
Mm-hmm.
So a hemiplegic migraine is an area of localized weakness in the body, which made total sense, right? So I kind of skipped out of there and I was like, see, nothing was wrong. It's just a migraine. Ha ha ha, I was right, kind of thing. And then she rang me back an hour later. Not good. She said, look, I've just been on my lunch break and I was speaking to my colleague and she said that I probably should have sent you to A&E. You could have had a stroke. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. I thought, well, that's a little bit more serious than a migraine. Not great. So I got sent off to A&E. By this time it was like 5-6 p.m. at night, so I ended up having to stay over. And then 3 days later, the neurologist came over to me, sat on the end of my bed, pulled like the curtain around my bed, and he just kind of sat there and he was like, you always look really excited. And he kind of looked straight into my eyes and he was like, okay, Jessie, but we think that we know what this is now. And I was like, okay, great, what is it? Thinking like, oh my gosh, it's going to be a brain tumor. Oh my God, I'm going to die. You know how your thoughts kind of just run away with you at the time. Yeah. And I was 22. I'd never even been in a hospital, like other than to visit someone. So this was like super out of my comfort zone. I was so scared, so just overwhelmed with everything. And he sat there and he looked me straight in the eye and he was like, okay, we want to do one more test to confirm it, but we think it's something called multiple sclerosis. I was like, oh, okay, well, okay. And he was like, do you know what that is? I was like, no, I haven't got a clue. And then the most pivotal line out of my whole story came when he said, okay, the best thing for you to do right now is to go home and Google it, find out what it is for yourself. Oh my gosh, you should not tell anybody that. That was such bad advice. But at the time I thought it was normal. So I was like, oh, okay, fine. I'll just do that. And I knew nothing. I literally knew nothing. So I'd never heard of MS. I didn't know anybody with it. And so when I came across all these symptoms and things online that people were having, and MS groups on Facebook are like sometimes the worst places to be, because people aren't very tactful sometimes, let's say, in that. So, there was people like leaving comments and things saying, oh, I woke up and I was blind this morning, or I lost my vision suddenly, or I lost my legs. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get that. Because I thought it was like the cold. When you have a cold, it's standard symptoms, right? You have a runny nose, you have sneezes. Yeah, that's not the same with MS at all. So that was a very big learning curve for me, for sure. And yeah, it from then on, like I just spiraled into depression completely. that took a really long time for me. I mean, for some people, it can take a week, it can take a month. For me, it took 4 years to actually get my head around this. It freaked me out so bad. It was so overwhelming, so scary. And not only that, but like a few weeks after coming out of hospital and having my left side not working, my right hand stopped working as well. And that was my drawing hand. I was studying to be an illustrator. I wanted to be an illustrator. And now all of a sudden, I couldn't even hold a pencil. I just felt like I had such a loss of purpose at that time. And I just felt so angry and so confused and depressed. And just, I remember I kept saying things like, you know, what did I do to deserve this? Why do I have this thing? Like, why me? You know, and it was very much that internal sort of like searching. I just needed answers. I think that was what it was. I just needed answers. And I think because I didn't see my MS nurse or a neurologist for about 4 or 5 months after that happened in hospital, where I was told to go home and Google it, I had no answers to anything. So there was no closure there. And I think it all just, the point where it all got too much was, I remember being at a set of traffic lights once on a really busy road in the middle of Leicester. And I was so depressed and I was so down and I was just so angry. I was just like, you know, I could make this all end right now. I could just fall into that traffic and just make it all end right now. Oh, and that's awful, isn't it? That's an awful thought to have at 22 years old. It's ridiculous. But like I said, it wasn't until about 4 years after when I actually started to really come to terms with things. And I think so I'm going into employment straight after that diagnosis, and I didn't tell anybody about MS because I was quite ashamed of it. You know, I didn't want people to pity me and things like that. So I just kind of kept it really low. I didn't tell anybody. And it wasn't until 4 years after, when I left employment, became self-employed, started a business with my partner, which was like giving advice to brides and things on their wedding day. We did a Facebook Live every single day for a year. That's where it started. So so I started to mention more things like, oh, I'm feeling really exhausted today, or like I'm feeling really tingly today and weird, and things like that. And I started to bring in more MS kind of things, and I got more comfortable talking about it. And then all of a sudden I got an influx of messages from brides to be saying, oh my gosh, I have fibromyalgia, or I have some other kind of invisible disability that nobody knows about. And you know, they were saying like, oh, you can help me, like, how do I navigate my energy for the wedding day? How do I decorate my wheelchair? How do I disguise an oxygen tank into my dress? Like, all of these things were just coming, and I was like, oh my God, like, my story can help somebody. This is insane. What is going on? And it was at that point that I realized that actually this thing that I'd been given wasn't a bad thing at all. And actually it's just a vehicle for me to change myself into a new version of me. Like, this gives me the opportunity to help so many people, and I have so much more purpose than I ever would, you know, if I was just drawing pictures, or if I was just designing fabrics or something like that. I have so much more of an appreciation for life now, and and I take so much more care of my body now, because I never used to before. Like, I just took it for granted. I think, like we all do, we all take that for granted sometimes. We all take our health for granted. We all think, oh, it'll be fine. Like, if I don't work out today, I'll just do it next week. It doesn't really matter. And I think it's just having that realization. I almost felt like I was handed a clock. I handed like a countdown timer. And it sounds so morbid, I know, but that's how it felt at the time. I felt like I felt like I made that realization, and I had that time limit, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is not good. This is not a good way to live. Like, I was working stupid amounts before, and I was practically killing myself. It was ridiculous. So now, having this realization and having these limits on your energy, and having these limits on what you can do every day, and what is kind of too much for you to do as well. And that is a problem in itself. That is something that I'm trying to come to terms with, because I am one of those people that like to be busy and productive and do things, and I do get frustrated when I'm exhausted, or when I'm just like, I know that I shouldn't. When you get that feeling and you're just like, I know that I shouldn't keep doing this because my body's really telling me to stop. Yeah, so this is really interesting, actually. I actually started making it about 5 months ago. And the reason I started making it was because I remember I was in a doctor's waiting room, and I was like surrounded by patients and stuff, and you know how waiting rooms are, they're all like kind of a little bit claustrophobic, like it's too many people. This was before COVID and things like that, I have to say that now. And and I was feeling really anxious, and I was just like, as soon as you walk into those appointments, doctors kind of give you a bit of a pop quiz, don't they, on your medical history, and you're expected to kind of remember, like, when did you start that medication, what was the date of your relapse, like what symptoms did you have leading up to the relapse, and you just sat there and you're like, I've got no idea. How am I supposed to remember that? That's insane. And I think it was when as well, because so I was having loads of random weird sort of sensory kind of symptoms. I didn't know if there were symptoms. I didn't know if they were MS or something else. When you get that feeling, you're just like, I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
And I felt like the doctor didn't believe me, and that was a big thing. And it made me feel so unconfident, and it made me feel like I didn't know anything. And I didn't like that. I didn't like how it took that empowerment away from me. So my nurse told me to actually start making some notes for the next time I go to appointments, so I could note down like when I started this medication and like when symptoms started and things like that. So I started to make notes, as I think we all do, and I was just scribbling them down in the notebook, and I was scribbling down things like 7 a.m, right hand tingly, or like 11 a.m, feeling really exhausted, not sure why. When I took notes to my doctor and he was like flicking through the pages or whatever, he kind of just took one look at it and was like, yeah, well, I haven't really got time to go through this. And I was like, oh, that's a point. You only have like 10 minutes or whatever with the doctor, right? So yeah, and I came out of that appointment and I was like, okay, there must be a better way. There must be a better way to be able to track symptoms and to be able to just like make some sort of system so you can just walk into a doctor's office and just point to something and go, look, this is how my symptoms are behaving. They are all over the place, or they are getting better, or they're getting worse. There must be a better way. So because I'm into graphic design and I love illustrating and graphic design and things like that, I was looking at, I don't know if you've heard of bullet journaling.
Yeah.
Have you heard of bullet journaling?
Yeah.
I got obsessed with it. And I was like, this could be a great way to track symptoms. I love this. And I got really into it. And I made all these sheets and things. I sent them out to the people in my Enabled Warriors group on Facebook. And I was like, what do you guys think of these? Like, are these helpful? And they all started using them. They took them to the doctors and things like that. And they were like, oh, this is brilliant. These are really helpful. These just like track everything, and I can keep tabs on everything. I can spot patterns. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I really like that. That's good. So I interviewed some doctors on my podcast anyway. And I was like, at the end of the podcast when you're just kind of having a chat and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, I made these sheets. What do you think of these sheets? And they were like, well, from a doctor's perspective, we'd actually kind of need this X, Y, Z. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I was like, so we can actually like put all this information together, and we can make something that's super helpful for not only patients like me and you, but it's going to be helpful for doctors as well. Great.
Yeah.
I got an email from the MS Trust, and it was saying about like COVID and like fundraising events being cancelled and things, and like really struggling with donations. And I was like, oh my God, I could use this book to help you guys. It kind of all just fell into place.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the story of how it all happened, how it all started. And I am so grateful to be able to, not only help like MS Trust and different charities and things raise their donations, but like also to help patients, help doctors. It's just awesome. It makes me feel so proud